Carl, I think one advantage that you might have had making this film as opposed to anyone else making this film is perhaps greater sympathy in getting access to some of the incredible interview subjects that you had. I wonder if you can talk about your ability to gain access to those interviews.
Well, I interviewed over 85 people, and all their names are in the additional witnesses also. But you know, being the son of William Colby gets you maybe 2 interviews with the couple of the OSS buddies. And someone like Bob Woodward or Seymour Hersh or Secretary Gates or Donald Rumsfeld or Brent Scowcroft, you got to do your homework. And so I would probably spend about 2 days writing that email. And I absorbed as much as I could. And I'm, you know, having been divorced from this subject my whole life, I've been kind of immersed in this area. So I wrote to them telling them what I'd like to talk to them about. And it's almost like if you were in, let's say, London, and you meet somebody like Thom, and you know Thom has been in Africa. And so you say, Thom, how's Africa? What's going on in Ethiopia? He's like, well, what are you talking about? Whereas if you say, Thom, I've heard that Sheikh Ahmad in Mogadishu has organized a troop of like 400 guys, and they're getting armament from Syria, and it's being transversed, you know, through this other group in Somalia, and et cetera, et cetera. So you know something. Well, then they will tell you something back. The agency is like that. It's a little bit like some of you go to Hollywood or, you know, studios. Hey, how's the movie business? Well, what does that mean? Whereas if you say, I've heard that so-and-so's deal went south, but I have something that's, you know, in that vein, then you're in the business a little bit. So it's a little bit asking them things that they will respect you for the question, and then they know that there'll be a dialogue.
We can take some questions from you. Right here?
Yeah.
In reference to that privileged information, do you still have access to documents laying around your house? Do you ever did your dad have paperwork?
Well, I mean, there's documents laying around the office, but those are more OSS records and his diaries and things, which actually I've kind of wondered about. Maybe they do have, you know, sensitive information in them. But we're going to donate them to probably Georgetown University Library, and so it'll be open to everybody to have access to. I mean, I didn't ask for anything special from the CIA. I mean, I know people there, obviously, but I just went out to visit with them and say that this is what I'd like to do, and if there's any information you can give me that might help, and they gave me some documents, but there's nothing secret or top secret. My ambition was not to, you know, delve in and tell stories, and there are people that I could have talked about or made notions about. I mean, it almost reminds me, when I was like 15 years old, I went to Indonesia for the summer and had a terrific summer with staying with one of my best friends his father was the ambassador in Indonesia, and so we went to Sumatra, and it was fantastic. And I remember I came back and told my dad, I said, oh, I met Mr. X, you know, really terrific guy, really admiring of you, and, you know, wonderful guy. Did you ever see him? And he goes, huh, very interesting. Don't ever mention his name again. So I realized, well, this guy I'd gone hunting with, whatever, was a, you know, deep cover, and my little part of my helping the mission is not to reveal his name. So that kind of thing would occur here and there all across the whole life. I mean, you'd come home and there'd be somebody in the house. I mean, so I walked down the stairs in Saigon, and there was a woman all in black, funereal garb on, and my mother was consoling her, so I realized something had happened, and I see pictures of her husband had been found on the river the day before, floating on the river, chopsticks jammed through his ears and tortured and left for dead. And so how does she know him? How does she know her? Why is this reporter over here tonight? You know, who does he work for? And so you never really confronted him directly about who's this guy? Like, who does he work for? You wouldn't say that. As a matter of fact, I never even talked to my brothers or sisters about what he did. It just kind of dawns on you. It'd be like if your father is a senior detective in NYPD, lives out in Rockland County, disappears maybe for the weekend, tells you he'll be back whenever he's back, and, you know, he's doing American gangster kind of work. You know, and so you sort of take it as a given that that's what he does, and and you support the mission up to a point that you then start asking more, pertinent questions later. And then that's when it became more interesting.
The question was how much that your mother revealed to you was new to you. Or...
Well, I started the project thinking, well, I'll do a sort of a profile about my father as a Cold Warrior and clandestine operative, and then almost as an afterthought, I thought, well, I'll interview my mother. Maybe she'll have something to say. And then everything changed, and it really became sort of my mother and my odyssey to uncover who my father was. And she's very courageous, and she's been through a lot and suffered, and it's her kind of forthrightness and her guile, really. I mean, she just speaks to me. The woman you're seeing is not talking. She doesn't know she's talking to you. She's just talking to me. That's why she says, "Oh, Carl," or whatever. And I realized that midway through, and I thought, my God, she's just talking to me. And I thought that was a great thing to share with everybody else. And Jay Freund, my editor, was here. I remember when we first looked at that, he goes, "There's something interesting in here." So, and I think, I started out making a film about my dad, and it ends up being kind of a Valentine to my mother.
If you could speak to your father right now, what would he say to you about this particular movie?
He'd probably feel I was pretty fair, because like during the hearings and when he'd come back from Vietnam, we'd argue about the war, and I'd tell him, like I said in the film, this napalm and what's going on, you're just brutalizing these people, and what's the end game, and he would try to be reasonable, and try to make me think it through, and he was very colored by his Jedburgh, France and Norway experience. He thought he was liberating oppressed people. And as a young, 24-year-old, he blew up Nazi troop trains, and then villages suffered reprisals. And he watched as villages were decimated. So he knows the price. I think he would think that I was being fair. He might think I was a little stretching it maybe with the Phoenix program. I wasn't describing it as fully as he would like it to be. But he had no qualms, really, interestingly. He was not on the no apology tour. He's a tough guy. I think he probably would take exception. The biggest revelation would be my mother, because I think he would see who he left behind. And I have a feeling that in this last week or two of his life, he was reminiscing, or how do you say, kind of calling up, what have you done in your life? Like, who are you? It doesn't matter that you're general, whatever, or ambassador, whatever. It all fades. I mean, even he would tell me as a young boy, we lived in Rome near the Colosseum, there's the Arch of Constantine. And he would tell me the emperors would come in their greatest moment of triumph. They would go under the Arch of Constantine in 60 AD. Scipio Africanus, we named our dog after Scipio, be marching under. But there'd always be a little slave boy on the chariot with him, whispering, "Sic transit gloriam," all glory passes. This is your moment. But I think he understood that. It's a very treacherous, almost chilling view he had towards the world. One of his young guys who worked for him, 24 years old in Laos, took him up to the mountain where he was working with Vang Pao against the Pathet Lao, the Free Laotian, the Hmong people. And my father was there, and so Vince said, "So what do you think? This is great, right? We've got 30,000 Hmong, and you're bringing in all this CIA materiel and weapons, and everything's good, right? Don't you think it's going to work out?" And my father looked across this like Shangri-La and said, "I don't know, maybe not." It's like he had a fatalistic air about him. It's like something that none of us would really ever say. Acceptable losses. You would be devastated if one of your friends or children, obviously, was killed. I think he absorbed it. Just had a capacity to absorb and inflict pain that is not in your vocabulary.
here. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks especially to Carl Colby.